I heard it with my own ears. Why is he still alive? The laughter that followed wasn't loud, just sharp enough to cut deep. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just walking up to knock on the door to call Brian and Stacy down for dinner. I had made the grilled salmon everyone used to rave about, the kind Elaine would marinate with a bit of honey and black pepper. But I stopped, not out of exhaustion, but because that sentence hung in the air like a knife yet to fall. I stood frozen in the hallway, where the faint light from the kitchen still spilled out, where I once watched Brian toddle in to show off his perfect score in 3rd grade. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I thought I'd say something or walk away, but I did neither. I stood there. I breathed. People always said Elaine's death was the most painful thing in my life, but it wasn't. That sentence was, because the dead can't choose how they're forgotten. But I was standing here, still alive, still present, and still treated as if I didn't exist. I turned back, went down to the kitchen. The smell of salmon still lingered in the air. I set the table, poured water, arranged the silverware neatly as I had for years. Stacy came down first, smiling at someone else, not me. Brian followed, avoiding my eyes as if I were a stranger. Emily was glued to her phone, not saying hello. No one asked if I'd eaten. I sat at the corner of the table, next to the chair Elaine used to sit in. Everyone chatted lively. They talked about the upcoming holiday, about getting a dog, about the new school. I didn't join in, not because I had nothing to say, but because I understood. Some dinners aren't for eating. They're for realizing where you stand in this house. And I knew from that moment, everything I believed about family, about love, gratitude, a father's place, was no longer true. And I sat there amid the lively chatter, like a faint shadow among people who share my last name but no longer remember I'm their flesh and blood. The salmon grew cold on the plate. The apple pie went untouched. Stacy was talking about a colleague who just bought a house in Florida. Brian nodded, tossing in a few unfunny jokes. Emily sat hunched over her phone, occasionally giggling at things I didn't understand. No one asked if I'd eaten. No one asked if I wanted more water or coffee. No one asked me anything. I sat there for over an hour, trying to sit up straight, forcing a smile when needed, trying to keep anyone from noticing I was sitting in a chair that felt as cold as the one that once belonged to my wife Elaine, who used to make this apple pie and taught me how to fold napkins neatly. When Stacy got up to clear the table, I stood too, like a machine. I carried plates to the kitchen, rolled up my sleeves, and washed. No one told me to, but I needed to do something, anything to keep my hands from shaking. I picked up each plate, as if picking up pieces of my shattered dignity. The water was warm, but it felt like needles pricking my palms. I heard Stacy and Brian's laughter from the living room, echoing like an outdated recording on repeat. Emily passed through the kitchen to go upstairs, her eyes avoiding mine, her steps hurried. She didn't say goodbye, not a glance, not a word. I used to carry her through her early years when Brian was unemployed, when Stacy worked night shifts as a nurse, and left her with us to cover her 3rd shift. I used to rock her to sleep, feed her, wipe her tears when she fell off her bike. Now she passed by me like I was invisible. I grabbed my coat in silence, opened the back door, and stepped into the yard. No one asked where I was going. No one saw me off. I didn't blame them. What's the point of blaming when people stop seeing you as human? I drove home, the 14-minute drive from Brian's place to my old house, feeling like a lifetime. Christmas lights were already up on many porches, their twinkling glow hitting my windshield like scratches on a lake's surface. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise to drown it out. I needed to face the silence. At home, I turned on the kitchen light. The house was dead quiet. No footsteps, no smell of food, no sound of Elaine rummaging through the tea cabinet or calling out from the living room. I turned on the kettle, took the green ceramic mug Elaine loved most, and made tea. While waiting for the water to boil, I opened the drawer under the oven, the one where I kept important things. Still, there was the receipt for the $48,000 transfer I pulled from my retirement fund to help Brian buy the house I just left as a stranger. I had tucked a small handwritten note with it. No strings attached, just love. I picked up the note, reread each word. My handwriting had trembled slightly with age, but it was still clear. I remembered writing it on a February morning, snow still clinging to the windowsill. My heart full of hope that this would give my son a good start. Now, sitting here with a warm mug of tea, I wondered, do they still remember that love? Or to them, am I just an unpaid debt that hasn't died yet? A lingering sigh in the house they want to call home but don't want me in. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The tea from last night was still in the thermos, cooled but still bitter. I didn't turn on the light. The morning glow through the curtains was enough to guide me from the kitchen to the storage room, where I kept nearly all the important papers after Elaine passed. I knelt to open the filing cabinet, an old wooden chest with a rusty lock I still kept the key for in my desk drawer. The last time I opened it was in 2014, to store the hospital's condolence letter after Elaine's death. I hadn't touched it since. But this morning it wasn't curiosity or nostalgia. It was the need to confirm I still had something that was mine. I pulled out stacks of papers, blowing off the thin layer of dust. There was Brian's birth certificate copy, my marriage license with Elaine, tax bills, life insurance letters, and then I saw a silver-green envelope tucked at the bottom. I recognized Elaine's slanted handwriting instantly. I had never read this letter. On the envelope, she wrote, "Only open when you feel yourself starting to disappear." I sat on the floor, opened the letter. The ink had blurred in spots, but the words were clear. "Walter, if you're reading this, it means you're feeling lost. Don't let yourself be forgotten. I've seen you fade in the eyes of many, even Brian, but I know there's a part of you that won't give in. Hold on to that part. Hold on to yourself." I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest like a reminder. I needed to do something, not to punish anyone, but to pull myself back from the edge of invisibility. I poured more tea, picked up the landline, and called Martin. We were colleagues at the construction company in 1982, then friends for 3 decades. Now retired, he lived not far from me. I wasn't calling for legal advice. I was calling to talk to someone who still remembered who I was. Martin answered after 3 rings. "Walter?" he asked, his voice still thick with a Pennsylvania drawl. "What's up?" I didn't know where to start. I just said, "I think I was wrong to believe my son loved me." A few seconds of silence. Then he replied, "Then start over. But this time, don't be wrong." We arranged to meet at the small coffee shop on Birch Street, where we used to sit every Saturday morning in the 90s. I arrived 15 minutes early. Martin walked in, striped shirt, still holding the leather notebook he used back when he practiced. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. A nod and a look were enough. I told him everything from the start, about the dinner, about the sentence, about how the whole family looked through me like I was a burnt-out light bulb. I spoke slowly, not bitter, not complaining, and Martin listened, not interrupting, just nodding or frowning at the right moments. When I got to the part about the $48,000 receipt and the no-strings-attached note, Martin gave a sad smile. "You're still a hopeless romantic, Walter." I laughed, but it was a soundless laugh. I sipped my cold coffee and asked, "Can I take back what I gave? Legally, it's not easy, but you can take back the most important thing, control over the rest of your life." We sat longer, discussing specific legal steps, revoking medical power of attorney, changing beneficiaries in the will, closing joint accounts. Each step Martin outlined was clear, not about retaliation or revenge, just steps to reclaim boundaries, to reclaim a presence that had been erased. I said, "I'm not doing this out of anger." Martin replied, "I know. You're doing it because you need to know you still exist." I sat there, feeling as if someone had propped up a shape inside me that had gone soft. Not to go fight, but to stand upright again. After a fall no one caught. The meeting ended in silence. I shook Martin's hand, took the sample documents he gave me, and stepped outside. The sky was bright but cloudy. The breeze was cool, but my chest felt warmer. I didn't know what I'd do next, but I knew I wouldn't sit waiting at a table where no one saved me a seat. I'd build my own table, and if anyone wanted to sit with me, they'd have to ask first. I never thought a pen stroke could feel so heavy, but the next day, sitting in Martin's office, holding the blue pen he handed me, it felt like holding a small blade. On the desk was the old will, drafted 6 years ago, right after Elaine passed. Back then I thought simply, whatever I have, I'll leave to Brian. No hesitation, no second thoughts, never imagining a day like this. Brian's name was capitalized, first on the line under primary beneficiary. Below it was Stacy's. I remembered asking Martin to add her name, wanting to show I accepted her like my own daughter. A gesture of goodwill, an effort to connect. Now, looking at those 2 names, they glared like accusations. I drew a firm line. The blue ink cut through Brian and Stacy's names like a slash through old hopes. My hand didn't shake anymore. It felt strange, like a fever breaking after days of smoldering. I looked at Martin. He didn't speak, just nodded slightly and turned to the next page. I rewrote the entire will. The house I live in will be sold after I'm gone. All proceeds going to the Homeless Veterans Support Fund, a small but serious organization. Not because I'm a veteran, I'm not. But I know what it's like to have a place called home, then one day be seen as a burden, an inconvenience, unnecessary. They fought. Now they're forgotten, like me now. I closed the old savings account where Brian had a secondary card for emergencies. I kept it there thinking, if he needs it, at least he has something to fall back on. But now I think, I didn't teach him to stand on his own 2 feet. I just let him get used to walking on my back. I called the bank, asked to cancel the card, block online access. The operator asked why. I just said, change in family circumstances. Then I moved all the money to an account in my name only, for personal expenses, and a small portion to be donated regularly to the organization I chose. I signed the papers, page by page. Each signature peeled off another layer of my old self. Martin handed me the final copy. he asked. You sure? I looked out the window, where maple branches were starting to shed leaves, and answered without thinking. I've never been sure of anything in my life. On the drive home, I didn't play music. I just listened to the tires grinding on the road. It felt like driving across a long bridge, knowing I'd decided not to go back to the other side. At home, I opened the bedroom closet. Still, there were things I bought for Brian when he was young. A model car, a baseball card box, the cap I wore when I took him to his first Yankees game. I took each item out, not throwing them away, just packing them neatly into a cardboard box. I labeled it, no longer needed. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge. There was still some apple pie from yesterday. I cut a small slice, warmed it, ate slowly, not because it was delicious, but because I needed something to anchor me, to remind me I was still alive. I opened my phone, scrolled through contacts. Brian's name was at the top, marked as favorite. I hovered over the delete button for a few seconds, then let go. I wasn't ready to remove him from my phone. But in my heart, he was no longer in that place. I went out to the porch, sat in the wooden chair Elaine loved. The wind had picked up, sparrows flitted back and forth, never staying long. I thought about what Martin said. You can take back the most important thing, control over the rest of your life. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I saw clearly. I was no longer the model father I imagined myself to be. No longer the man who'd do anything, sacrifice anything, for a place in his children's hearts. I was just me, and that was enough. I was about to close my notebook when my phone lit up, a text from Emily. The words appeared slowly, as if her hands trembled while typing. Are you mad at me? I didn't dare talk to you that night. I stared at the screen. Each word was like a drop of water hitting a long, cracked table. I didn't rush to reply. I poured more tea, watched the steam rise, then placed my hands on the keyboard. I typed slowly, weighing each word. Not mad, but I hope you're not like them. Sent. I didn't wait. I turned off the screen, but my heart didn't turn off. Half an hour later, Emily texted back. I want to see you. Tomorrow, okay? Lunchtime, at the bakery near school. I knew that place. A small spot. Classic baked goods. A few tables by the window where people sit watching cars pass and pretend to live a gentle life. The next day, I arrived early. I chose a corner table, ordered a black tea. I wore the light blue shirt Elaine once said made me look less sad. I didn't know if Emily would show, but I waited, and she came. She walked in, hair messily tied up, wearing her school uniform and an old hoodie. In her hand was a small paper bag. I brought this. She set the bag on the table. I opened it. A slice of apple pie, still warm. Without another word, she sat down. I didn't eat yet. I looked at her, and instead of asking about her parents, instead of talking about that night, I just asked, have you ever felt lost in your own home? Emily looked down. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, then nodded. Her eyes were red. I didn't say I know. I didn't need to. The feeling of being treated as non-existent, she knew it well. I think Mom and Dad don't really hear me. As long as I'm quiet, do well in school, don't cause trouble, it's fine. But sometimes I feel like if I disappeared, it wouldn't matter. That sentence, it choked me. I sipped my tea to hide it. Then I said, when I was your age, I felt that way too. But the difference was, I tried to be what others needed, to the point I forgot who I really was. Emily was quiet. Then she opened her backpack, pulled out a notebook. She flipped to a page in the middle, handed it to me, a pencil sketch. An old man sitting at the head of a dining table. The other chairs empty, but behind him a small, very small shadow still standing, watching. I drew this last night. I ran my fingers lightly over the paper. I couldn't speak, because for the first time in years, I felt someone saw me, not as a duty, a burden, or someone counting down their days, but as a person. I picked up the spoon, cut a piece of the pie. It wasn't too sweet, the crust slightly burnt at the edges, like the kind Elaine made in early fall. I asked, do you still keep your other drawings? Yes, but I haven't shown anyone. Can I see them? If you promise not to say you should draw something else. I laughed, a real laugh. I'm done telling people what they should do, Emily. I just want to be invited to a small corner of your world if you'll let me. She didn't answer right away, but she took out her phone, opened the gallery, and there were dozens of drawings. People, scenes, light, even handwritten pages like a visual diary. We sat a bit longer. I finished my tea. She nearly finished her pie. When we stood up, I said slowly, next time, I'll bring pie. You just bring stories to tell. Emily nodded. No hugs, no promises. But as she turned to leave, I saw her steps were lighter than when she arrived, and in me something began to ease. That evening, I sat at the table flipping through the sketch Emily drew for me at the bakery. The paper was thin but heavy. Something that had burned in me for years was finally named in an image. A man still there but unnoticed. I placed the drawing in the drawer right under Elaine's letter. Then I stood, grabbed my coat, took my keys. I went to the garage. How long had it been since I'd come out here after 9 at night? Probably since the day Brian moved out. No, before that, since that summer, I bought a whole new set of tools just to invite him to build a walnut coffee table together. The tools still hung neatly on the wall: ruler, plane, drill, screwdriver bits, the chisel set I gave Brian for his 30th birthday. He never touched them. I used to think he's just busy. Then when he's settled, we'll work together. Then there was no when anymore. I turned on the dim yellow light in the garage, sat on the wooden chair, ran my hand lightly over each tool as if touching an unformed dream. I remembered teaching him how to use a circular saw when he was 13. Remembered the time he broke a drill bit, and I didn't scold him, just said, "It's okay. Breaking things is the fastest way to learn." But now those tools were just relics of things that never happened. I took a cardboard box and some cloth, starting to pack each item one by one, carefully, not rushing. Each piece placed in the box was a small goodbye. I labeled it clearly: woodworking tools, donate to youth shelter. I chose this shelter because they have a vocational program for kids without families. At least these things would be used by someone, instead of sitting here gathering dust, reminding me that I've been forgotten. The next morning, I called to rent a small apartment in Maple Hollow. It's about 30 minutes drive from my house, quiet, full of trees, near a bookstore and an old grocery store I always liked visiting on weekends. I didn't tell anyone, not Brian, not Stacy, not Emily. No one knew I moved. No one asked, and strangely, I felt relieved. I started packing my things. The things I truly needed: a few sets of clothes, some books, my wedding photo with Elaine, a wall clock she used to love, a set of teacups. Everything else I left behind. Not because I couldn't carry it, but because I didn't need to carry things that no longer held meaning. I called a moving company, scheduled for the weekend. The new apartment was small, just one bedroom, but it had a balcony overlooking a small lake. I'd never lived alone before. Before marrying Elaine, I lived with my mother. After she passed, I lived as if she were still there, in the kitchen, in the closet, in the sound of the broom sweeping early in the morning. Now there was no one to pretend for, just me facing myself. I left a note on the kitchen table: "If anyone looks for me, just say he went to find himself again." No need for goodbyes to this place. It hadn't truly been home since Elaine passed. These walls no longer held laughter, the smell of morning toast, or anyone to wake me with a grumbling, "Walter, don't boil the tea too long, it gets bitter." I drove to the new apartment on a windy afternoon. The keys were in a sealed envelope at the manager's desk. I opened the door, saw clean wooden floors, light pouring in from a large window. I set the box down in the middle of the living room, sat on it. I didn't feel lonely. I just felt empty, the way a washed-out vase feels, waiting to be filled with something truly worthwhile. I hung Elaine's photo on the wall near the small dining table. No need for many frames. One was enough. I made tea, stood on the balcony looking down at the lake. A pair of wild ducks were swimming. I knew tomorrow would come. I knew no one would text asking, "Where are you?" But maybe, one day, Emily would text, "How are you living?" And if I'm still alive then, I'd reply, "Fine." But my kind of fine, not someone else's leftover, and that would be enough. The third morning in the new apartment started like the others. Quiet, simple, no one calling my name. I made tea, read a few pages of a book, then carried a chair to the balcony. The early sunlight wasn't harsh yet. The lake below still misty. I thought today I'd visit the old bookstore to buy a few mystery novels Elaine used to like. I'd even jotted down a shopping list: salt, detergent, and a jar of honey. Everything was very ordinary, but then around 10 in the morning there was a knock at the door. I got up, walked to the front door. Didn't open it right away, just looked through the peephole. It was Brian, hands in his coat pockets, standing slightly turned, not facing the door directly. I stood still, waited. He knocked again, then again. Not too hard, but persistent. I still didn't open. I wasn't curious, not scared, and strangely not sad either. After about 5 minutes, Brian left. I watched through the curtain's gap as his figure disappeared down the hallway. Shoulders slightly slumped, steps unhurried. I made another cup of tea. This time I used less sugar. The next day the phone rang. I looked at the screen. Stacy's number. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. "Hello? You're turning the whole family upside down, you know that?" Stacy's voice wasn't as angry as I'd imagined. It was irritated, mixed with worry, like the way people talk when something doesn't go according to their plan. I didn't answer right away. I lifted my teacup, blew on it to cool it, then said, "Which family? The one that didn't invite me to dinner? Didn't invite me to live?" The other end went silent. I could hear her breathing, hesitant, unsure how to respond. Not because I'd said something harsh, but because she didn't expect me to be this awake. You can't do this, Walter. Brian just wants to talk." "Brian's had years to talk to me, Stacy. He only speaks when I'm no longer useful to him. And now I have nothing left to give, so he shows up. That's not, I cut her off. The first time in my life I interrupted Stacy without feeling guilty. You know, there's a kind of silence more toxic than insults. Dinners without thanks, passing by like I'm invisible. I've lived in that silence long enough. I'm done listening. Stacy sighed. Not angry, not arguing back, just tired. Maybe because she knew she no longer had control. Maybe because for the first time I was the one who hung up first. I set the phone down, stepped onto the balcony. The maple leaves had turned red-orange. The lake reflected a pale gray sky. I sipped my tea. It was slightly bitter, but it was my brew, my choice. No one forced it. No one took it. I thought of Brian, standing outside the door, hands in pockets, not saying a word. He was once the kid running around the yard with a baseball cap too big for him. Once asked me, "Dad, would you be sad if I didn't live at home?" I'd said, "As long as you're happy, no." Now I see that answer missed something. As long as you don't forget me. But he forgot, or chose to forget, and now I'm not waiting for him to remember anymore. I'm just waiting for my tea to cool enough to drink, waiting for the sun to rise enough to read without turning on the light. Maybe one day he'll come back. Not because he needs something, but because he wants to. But I won't be standing behind the door, hoping for it. I'll just be me. And that's still enough. That thought echoed in my head all night after the call with Stacy. Not as a mantra to comfort myself, but as a truth I'd finally touched after years of fumbling through roles. The model father, the devoted husband, the patient grandfather. The next morning, I went to Martin's office. It was starting to drizzle, the kind of late October rain, cold and quiet. I wore a thick coat, carrying the folder I'd prepared weeks ago. All the documents for the old house, the pickup truck that's been with me for 15 years, and the small share I had in the construction materials company. A gesture of appreciation given when I retired. Martin greeted me with a slow look, as if he knew today I'd say something important. I didn't need to explain much. We'd talked enough before. Today was for signing. I set the folder on the table, pushed it toward him. Martin opened it, flipped through each page, double-checking. His hands were steady, his face calm, but I saw something soften in his eyes. "All the assets?" he asked. I nodded. "The house, the truck, the shares, the remaining savings. All of it goes to the Homeless Veterans Support Fund." Martin folded his hands in front of his mouth, thoughtful for a moment, then asked, "You sure?" Straight on, no blinking. Surer than I've ever been. Because I'm done letting others decide who I am. Martin nodded slightly. No arguing, no warnings. He understood. Some men need saving. I needed to be acknowledged. We started the signing process. I signed each page, slowly, firmly, without hesitation, signing as if each stroke peeled off a piece of old skin. Pieces once labeled father, duty, sacrifice, now replaced with one word, freedom. I thought of the pickup truck. It carried Elaine and me through countless autumns, took Brian to baseball practice, sat outside the hospital in my wife's final days. Now it'll be sold, and the money will help build temporary homes for veterans left behind. I thought of the house that once smelled of grilled meat and apple pie. The house that echoed with laughter, arguments, Elaine's soft humming in the kitchen. The house now just an empty frame, no soul left, and it no longer held me. I thought of the company shares. A small amount, but a symbol of decades of work without complaint, without rest. Now I wanted to use it for those who did more than me but ended up in cold parks, silent clinics. After signing, Martin gathered the documents. "I'll finalize everything today. After the assets are sold, the fund will be set up in Elaine's name. You still want that?" I nodded. She always said we don't need to do anything grand. Just don't be indifferent. We stood up. No hugs, no long handshakes. Just two men who knew they'd crossed a threshold no one could return from. At the parking lot, I opened the pickup door, sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel one last time. I didn't start the engine, just sat there looking through the windshield speckled with tiny raindrops. In my head, I didn't hear Elaine's voice, or Brian's, or anything at all. Just a warm silence. I stepped out of the truck, grabbed my bag, and closed the door. Someone would pick it up in a few days. I didn't need to look back. That afternoon, I walked back to the apartment. The rain was still light. I didn't open an umbrella. I let it fall on my face, my hands, to feel present, existing, touched. At home I changed, made tea, opened the window to let a few raindrops in. On the table I placed Elaine's letter again, reread the last line. "Hold on to the part of you that won't give in." I smiled. That part was back now. Not with a shout, but with a pen stroke under my name. A signature no one made me write. A decision no one had to approve. I was sitting at the table, by the afternoon tea, still fragrant but cooling, when the phone buzzed lightly. A text from Emily. No words, just an attached image. I tapped to open it. It was a drawing. Still simple pencil lines like before, but this time deeper, heavier. An old man sitting alone on a park bench, leaning on a cane, head slightly bowed, as if pondering something that needed no answers. Next to him was an empty chair. On it, a folded piece of paper. drawn so clearly I could almost feel its creases. On the paper was a small line, "For someone who stayed anyway." I didn't know why, but my chest tightened. Maybe because Emily understood something my whole family never did, or maybe because for the first time in years I felt seen, properly. Not as an old man needing care, not as a shadow lingering in the corner of a dining room, but as someone who chose to stay, chose not to leave, when everyone else quietly walked away. I downloaded the image, opened the printer and printed it on A4 paper. The paper wasn't great, the ink not as sharp as the original, but I carefully trimmed the edges, smoothed out any creases. I stuck it on the fridge door with a round red magnet, the kind Elaine used to pin grocery lists. The spot was right in the center, where we used to hang Brian's middle school graduation photo, Emily's kindergarten picture, the one of us both at Yellowstone for the first time. Those photos were long gone. Just empty space. And now Emily's drawing was the only thing I left there. I stood looking at it for a long time. Each detail carried something. The empty chair like Elaine's absence. The paper like an acknowledgement. The man like me. But not just me. Anyone who's been forgotten. Quietly pushed out of dinners. Family memories. Guest lists. I made more tea. Set the cup on the small dining table across from the fridge. And sat gazing at the drawing as if looking into a mirror. A gentle mirror. No judgment. No scrutiny. Just reflecting what's real. That evening, I wrote a short handwritten letter, the first since Elaine passed, for Emily. I didn't use email. I sealed it, addressed it to her school, wrote on faintly patterned stationery I found at the bookstore recently. I wrote, "Thank you, Emily, for seeing me, and for not leaving. I don't need much, just to know there's still someone who remembers. Your drawing, it's the only family photo I still keep, and for me, that's enough." I folded the letter, careful as if wrapping a precious gift. The next morning, I walked to the post office. Clear sky, light breeze. I stood in line, mailed the letter like I was sending a part of myself, trusting it would reach the right place, the right person. Back at the apartment, I opened the fridge for milk to add to my tea, and my eyes instinctively lingered on the drawing. Something softened in me, like a hug through a glance, a handshake without touch. And I suddenly understood, a family isn't where all your kin are, but where at least one person doesn't turn away when you stay. And I'd found that person. In the granddaughter, who carried more silence than words, but knew how to place what mattered in the right spot. The empty chair in the drawing might always be there, but the paper on it, with its short message, was enough to keep me from feeling alone when sitting by myself anymore. I sipped my tea, smiled, because I knew, despite everything changing, I still hadn't lost one thing: a drawing, a message, and someone who chose to stay. I still remember the feeling of closing the old house's door for the last time. Not the feeling of someone leaving, but of someone long abandoned, finally confirming it with action. I didn't cry, didn't hesitate, just stepped out with a small duffel bag and one cardboard box. The only things I still called mine. No one stopped me. No one saw me off. No Brian. No Stacy. Emily didn't know, but I believe if she did, she'd have come, not to hold me back, but to hug me. And that was enough to let me leave in silence. I left the house keys on the dining table, where there used to be a blue patterned tablecloth Elaine loved. Next to it, I placed a small note, written in ink, neat round letters. "Don't look for me in the will. You looked away long ago." No anger, no resentment, just a late message. In the right place, at the right time. I taped it down with a piece of clear tape, then left. The sky that day had gentle sunlight, with a breeze just strong enough to send dry leaves tumbling across the driveway. I brought the last of my things to the new apartment. A small place on the third floor of a quiet building. No elevator, but the stairs weren't too steep, and the railing had old-fashioned wrought iron curves I liked. The new apartment had one bedroom, ivory white walls, dark wood floors, and large windows overlooking a row of maple trees shedding their leaves. In the afternoon, sunlight streamed in, casting shimmering shadows on the floor. No sound of footsteps in the hallway. No arguing voices. No one asking if I'd cooked yet. No one demanding I do more to prove I'm still useful. Just jazz music. I placed the small speaker on the shelf by the window, playing an old Bill Evans recording. The soft piano notes, like a breeze, slipped into every corner of the place, soothing everything I'd been holding tight. I sat in the wooden chair by the newly assembled dining table, hands cradling a hot cup of tea. My heart wasn't heavy anymore. It didn't break, didn't ache. It just let out a long, quiet breath, as if I could finally live at my own pace. I hung Elaine's photo on a small nail in the wall. Next to it was Emily's drawing. Both of them, one gone, one still growing, looked at me each day with eyes that didn't judge. This space, though small, was enough for me to move without bumping into anyone, enough to hear my own voice when reading, enough to say my own name without anyone laughing. That evening, I made more tea, opened the window to let the breeze in, and wrote in my notebook, This is home, not because it's big, not because someone's waiting, but because for the first time, I don't have to strain to be accepted. I set the notebook on the shelf. Outside, the city moved as usual. Streetlights came on, people passed by, but no one knew an old man had started over today. They didn't need to. I didn't need to prove it. The next morning, I woke up early. Sunlight through the curtains reminded me of mornings in the old house, but without the sadness. I walked downtown, bought bread and apricot jam. On the way back, I passed another old man watering plants on his balcony. We nodded to each other. No names, no reasons needed. I opened the apartment door, took a deep breath. The smell of new wood, tea, and clean air blended into an unpretentious fresh start. I sat down, took a bite of bread, and played last night's music again. This apartment had never heard arguments. No one had quietly walked away. No one had left me sitting alone at dinner, wondering if I was worth loving. Just me and peace in my heart. I didn't know how many years lay ahead, but I knew they wouldn't be spent waiting for anyone to come back, because I'd already left. Not to escape, but to live, for the first time, as myself. I thought I'd live out the rest of my days in that small apartment overlooking the lake. But then, one winter morning before the sun rose, I dreamed of Elaine sitting on the steps of the old cabin at the forest's edge, holding a cup of tea, her hair fluttering lightly in the breeze, smiling at me as if she were still alive. When I woke, I wasn't sad, just compelled. That cabin, we'd built it with our own hands after our first summer of marriage. A small wooden place, red cedar walls, tin roof, nestled at the forest's edge up north. It hadn't been touched in years. The last time Elaine and I were there was before her chemo started. A week after that dream, I went back. The path to the cabin was covered in dry leaves and vines. I unlocked the door, it creaked, dust coated everything. But the foundation was solid, the structure intact. All it needed was cleaning, repainting, and a bit of warmth. I spent the next 3 weeks working like a young man, scraping off old paint, replacing cracked windows, fixing the chimney, reinstalling kitchen shelves. It felt like living my 30s again, when building that cabin with the woman I loved was all I needed. I wasn't tired, I just felt I was doing something right. I bought an old cassette player from a flea market, the kind Elaine used to play jazz every evening while cooking. I found the wooden domino set she loved, a birthday gift I hand-carved in 1987. I hung the old lantern on the porch, repainted the rocking chair she used to read in. One afternoon, while sweeping the yard, I got a text from Emily. "Grandpa, what if I came up this weekend?" I texted back one line, "Bring a warm scarf and a light mood," and she came. Emily stepped off the local bus, small backpack, cheeks red from the cold. I greeted her with 2 cups of tea in hand, and she smiled when I held one out like a welcoming ritual. We didn't say much then, just sat on the porch, the breeze whispering through the pines, steam rising from our tea. From then on, Emily came every weekend. No Wi-Fi, no cable TV, but in that cabin we had jazz, the scratchy hum of old cassettes, the soft clack of dominoes on the wooden table, and the quiet presence of 2 souls learning to heal. We made tea in the old copper kettle, Elaine's now tarnished but still good at holding heat. Emily had her own cup, I had mine. Both sat on the kitchen shelf, always ready. No one mentioned the past, no need, because the past was already there, in the small details. The curtains Elaine sewed, the rough brown-red rug still smelling of pine, the set of porcelain plates with only 2 left intact. Each time Emily touched something, she seemed to understand, and left it be, no questions. We played dominoes like a ritual, no competition, no bets, just a way to be together quietly without filling the space with words. Some afternoons we both drew, Emily with her pencils, me just watching and pouring tea. Some nights we listened to old Ella Fitzgerald recordings, the yellow lamplight casting shadows on the wooden ceiling, what Elaine used to call memory's light. Once Emily brought a new drawing, didn't show it right away, just hung it on the wall by the window. It was a small cabin, 2 figures inside, faces unclear, just vague shapes, snow on the porch, a lantern hanging on the roof. I called this one, "For the place that didn't ask anything, just welcomed." I nodded, didn't speak, because it was true. This cabin didn't ask who I was, how I'd been disappointed, or how much time I had left. It just opened its door, and welcomed. That evening, as I chopped wood on the porch, preparing for a cold night in the cabin, I heard a motorcycle stop at the foot of the hill. But no footsteps came up the steps, no voice called out. Just a small sound, like something being placed in the wooden mailbox by the fence. Then the engine revved and faded away. I walked out, an envelope. No sender's name, but the familiar handwriting on white paper told me instantly. Brian. I brought it inside, didn't open it right away. Set it on the table next to the steaming teacup. The forest breeze slipped through the window's gap, carrying the scent of damp wood and late-season birds. I sat down, slowly opened the envelope, pulled out the letter. Just a few lines. Simple. No fluff. I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. I don't know how to make it right, but I want to start over. If you still want, Brian. I read it once, then again. Nothing extra. Nothing missing. But I didn't cry. Didn't hurt. Just stayed quiet. I folded the letter, careful as if it were fragile, and slipped it into the desk drawer. I didn't write back. Didn't call. Didn't text. Because I knew forgiveness isn't silence. Forgiveness is choosing not to keep hurting, and I'd made my choice. I stood, poured more tea. Outside, the sun was sinking behind the forest, shining through the trees, casting orange gold flecks on the cabin walls. I thought of the years I lived out of guilt, out of fear of being unneeded, out of believing love meant giving until I was empty. I once thought I was a good father for enduring silently, never blaming, never demanding, but now I understood. Love needs boundaries too. No one deserves to be invisible, even in their own family. Brian's letter, though sincere, couldn't erase the years he left me sitting alone at the dinner table. Left me to cover every expense. Left me existing like a worn-out shadow passing through. And when I had nothing left to give, he only then noticed I'd been there. I knew writing a letter was easy. Living it wasn't. I'd written plenty on paper, no strings attached. As long as you're happy, I'm always here, and I lived those words. But what did I get in return? A sentence. Why is he still alive? That sentence, I didn't keep it to fuel anger. I kept it as a milestone. Everyone has a moment they wake up. For me, it was that sentence. Emily came the next afternoon. I didn't mention the letter. We made tea as usual. She pulled out a new drawing, this time 2 cups on a windowsill, snow outside. No people in the picture, just the cups. I called it still warm, even in silence. I looked at her, smiled. She didn't need to know how everything had unfolded. She just needed to know I was still here, still okay. That evening, I took Brian's letter from the drawer, set it beside the new drawing. I didn't burn it, didn't tear it, just kept it as evidence. Not to punish him, but to remind myself I'd gone far enough not to need to turn back. And if one day Brian truly wanted to start over, not just with words but with time, with listening, with sitting down and asking, "Dad, are you tired?" then maybe I wouldn't lock the door. But not today. I blew out the lamp, pulled the curtains, and went to sleep. No haunting thoughts, no lingering regrets, just the forest breeze and the soft sounds of the night. Enough to know I was still alive, not for anyone else, but because I chose to live for myself. My 74th birthday began with beautiful silence. No phone ringing, no family texts, no hastily ordered cake, just the chirping of forest birds in the thin winter mist, and the gentle light of the sun slipping through the pines on the cabin porch. I made 2 cups of tea, a habit unchanged for months now, pouring evenly into 2 porcelain cups set on the old wooden table outside. One for me, the other, as always, I left there. Not exactly for anyone specific, but not for the air either. It was a sign of hope, of patience, of a part of me not yet fully closed off. I sat in the rocking chair, wrapped in the wool scarf Emily once gave me. Not too cold, but early winter chill always seeps more into the mind than the skin. I closed my eyes, listened to the forest's breathing, let my heart drift with the faint rustle of leaves falling on the porch. Then I heard footsteps. Light, steady, familiar. Emily. I opened my eyes. She stood at the top of the steps, holding a small wooden chair freshly painted, still smelling faintly of wet varnish. Carved boldly on the backrest, in clumsy but heartfelt handwriting, were the words, "You kept space for me." Emily didn't speak. She just set the chair down beside me, where there'd always been an empty space, the spot for the chair I'd kept there, though no one sat in it. I looked at the chair, then at her. No need for questions, no need for explanations, because I understood, and Emily did too. That chair wasn't just a gift, it was acknowledgement, a symbol of something simple but vital. I'd kept space for someone who came back. I handed Emily the other cup of tea. She smiled, sat in the new chair. The wood creaked lightly against the porch floor. 2 cups steamed in the chilly morning. We clinked them gently, no toasting fanfare. Just a small touch, as if to say, "I'm here. I'm still here." I didn't need thanks anymore. Didn't need anyone to recount what I'd done for them. Didn't need anyone to make amends, because I'd finally found the deepest part of myself I thought I'd lost. I looked at the table. 2 cups, a new chair, a girl with non-judgmental eyes, and me, sitting here not as a helpless father or a forgotten old man, but simply as a person being seen. I turned to Emily, asked softly, "How long did it take to paint that lettering?" "A week." I was scared of messing it up. I laughed, light but deep. "You didn't mess up. You wrote it better than anyone in this family ever wrote it better than anyone in this family ever wrote about me." We sat a while longer, reading a passage from an old Wendell Berry book, Elaine's favorite. I read aloud, voice slow. It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. Emily nodded quietly. She wasn't the kid who drew to escape anymore, but someone who understood that loneliness needed naming. That afternoon, we brought the chair into the cabin, set it by the fireplace. Emily left a new sketchbook for me. The cover read, "Things I saw when I sat with you." I didn't open it right away. I wanted to save it for a quiet night, by a hot cup of tea, with only the forest breeze and firelight dancing on the wooden ceiling outside. When Emily left, I saw her off from the porch. No hugs, no promises of "I'll be back," just a wave. But I knew she'd return, because that chair now had an owner, and I wasn't waiting in silence anymore. I sat back on the porch, the breeze stirring my gray hair. On the table, 2 cups held only lingering warmth now. But my heart wasn't cold, because in a world where people turn away when you have nothing left to give, having someone choose to come back just to sit together, quiet and present, that's the greatest gift. And I'd received it. I'd kept space. And the person who needed to come, came. In modern American society, where the pace of life grows ever faster, family bonds easily fracture under financial pressures, generational differences, and emotional isolation. Walter's story is not just a poignant slice of aging, but a wake-up call about the value of presence, listening, and mutual respect. When his son Brian and daughter-in-law Stacy stopped seeing him as part of their lives, his words became invisible. Even the meals he cooked went unthanked. The sentence, "Why is he still alive?" was an invisible knife, sharp enough to sever any illusions about family ties. What's thought-provoking is how Walter didn't respond with anger or revenge, but with actions to reaffirm his own worth. He quietly transferred his assets to a charity, moved out of his son's house, and rebuilt the cabin, a symbol of a new life where he could exist as a person, not defined by roles or obligations. Emily, his granddaughter, became the rare light, the only one who truly saw him and gave him a chair with the words, "You kept space for me." The lesson is clear. In a society fixated on productivity and youth, the elderly are easily seen as burdens. But like Walter, we can choose not to let others' indifference define our value. And if someone like Emily returns with sincerity, sometimes a single chair is enough to heal decades of loss. Thank you for staying until the end. Sometimes just one person listening is enough to heal a life. If you believe someone out there deserves to be seen like Walter, please subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story.